Let us be completely honest for a second. Dealing with a narcissist feels a lot like walking through a dangerous minefield where all the surrounding mines are made of fragile glass. You do not even need to do something massive or catastrophic to set them off. In fact, the smallest and most harmless observation can trigger a total and absolute collapse. The reason behind this is simple, yet it is something that most people completely miss. Narcissists are essentially living inside a fragile house of cards. They have spent their entire lives constructing a fake, grandiose version of themselves that is bulletproof, perfect, and superior to everyone else around them. But beneath that polished and shiny exterior lies an incredibly fragile ego that cannot handle even the slightest touch of reality. Think carefully about how a normal person handles everyday stress or a small rejection. If you happen to get a bit of negative feedback at work, or someone disagrees with you in a casual conversation, you might feel a brief flicker of annoyance, but you quickly move on. You adjust, you learn from it, and you keep going. A narcissist simply does not have that internal wiring. Their threshold for frustration is practically zero because they have tied their entire self-worth to the idea that they are special and flawless. Any form of disappointment is not just a minor bump in the road for them, it is a direct and terrifying attack on their very identity. This is precisely why they live in a state of constant, low-level terror. They are always anxiously waiting for the moment when the mask finally slips and the rest of the world sees them for who they actually are. When you challenge them, ignore them, or simply exist in a way that does not constantly stroke their ego, you are effectively pricking the bubble they have worked so hard to inflate. This leads directly to what psychologists call a narcissistic injury. It is not just that they get angry, it is that their internal reality starts to shatter right before their eyes. They suddenly feel small, exposed, and deeply ashamed. And because they completely lack the emotional maturity to process those heavy and uncomfortable feelings, they lash out instantly. They spiral out of control because they are desperately trying to regain control of a narrative that is constantly slipping through their fingers. They will shift the blame onto others, invent brand new lies, or play the helpless victim, all to stop you from seeing the deep cracks hiding in their armor. We are certainly not telling you this so that you can go out there and purposely poke the bear. In fact, trying to provoke a narcissist on purpose is dangerous, foolish, and completely exhausting. Instead, you need to deeply understand this core mechanism so you can protect your own peace of mind. When you finally recognize that their explosive outbursts are never really about you, but are entirely about their own terrifying internal weakness, it changes everything. You stop being the helpless target and start being the calm observer. So let us look closely at the specific triggers that reliably strip away that mask and force them to reveal their true, volatile colors. If you want to see a narcissist's world start to crack at the seams, try holding them accountable for their own actions. It is arguably the most effective way to watch their calm exterior vanish into thin air. For most regular people, admitting a mistake is just a normal part of life. It is how we learn, how we grow as individuals, and how we keep our relationships healthy and strong. But for a narcissist, taking basic responsibility is fundamentally impossible. To them, the admission of a single error is a massive crack in the foundation of the godlike, perfect image they have spent years crafting. In their twisted minds, making a mistake means they are ordinary. And to a narcissist, being ordinary is a fate far worse than death itself. They would literally rather burn their entire world down to the ground than admit they are not the undisputed hero of the story. The moment you firmly point out a failure, a glaring lie, or a harmful action, you are effectively demanding that they step off their high pedestal. This perceived threat triggers an immediate and intense defensive panic. They do not hear your words as a reasonable request for personal growth. They hear them as a direct and vicious assault on their perceived superiority, because they lack the emotional maturity to simply say that you are right and that they messed up. Instead, they immediately pivot to a complex system of mental gymnastics designed specifically to protect their fragile ego at all absolute costs. You will instantly see their face change, their tone shift dramatically, and the narrative turn completely against you before you can even finish your sentence. Expect a true masterclass in deflection the exact second you hold your ground. They will pull out every single tool in their dark arsenal. They will use blame shifting, gaslighting, and absolute denial. They might start by telling you that you are just being too sensitive, or they might suddenly bring up a completely unrelated mistake you made 3 whole years ago, just to divert the attention completely away from their current failure. They will rearrange the basic facts of what actually happened until the story sounds entirely different, effectively turning themselves into the innocent victim and you into the aggressive villain. They will act as if they are the ones being treated unfairly, even when they are clearly the ones who caused the problem in the first place. This exhausting process of avoiding basic responsibility is draining for everyone involved, yet they will do it tirelessly, because the alternative of being seen as an imperfect human being is simply too terrifying for them to contemplate. If you push back against them, they will often double down, growing increasingly aggressive or ice cold in order to force you to drop the subject entirely. It is a predictable and vicious cycle. You demand accountability. They feel the intense sting of their own inadequacy, and they fight back with everything they have just to maintain their false reality. Understanding that this defensive reaction is never a reflection of your failure to communicate, but rather a desperate automatic defense mechanism they use to save their own fragile ego, is the absolute first step towards staying sane when you are forced to deal with their inevitable, explosive pushback. The quickest way to reveal the true nature of a narcissist is to simply tell them no when they expect a resounding yes. Narcissists operate on a frequency of pure, unchecked impulsivity. Because they view themselves as the absolute center of the universe, they have developed a deep psychological dependency on instant gratification. They honestly believe that their personal needs, desires, and fleeting whims should be prioritized far above the laws of physics, the schedules of others, and the basic realities of daily life. When they want something, whether it is your undivided attention, a major favor, a material object, or a specific emotional reaction, they want it immediately. In their minds, they are never asking for a luxury or a special favor. They are simply demanding what they believe they are rightfully owed, and they think the world is constantly failing them if it does not instantly bend to their absolute will right that very second. When you deny them that instant pleasure or refuse to jump when they say jump, you are not just setting a healthy boundary, you are delivering a direct frontal assault on their deep-seated entitlement. To a narcissist, the word no is never just a simple word. It is an insulting blow. It is a clear signal that you do not view them as superior to yourself. And that realization sends a massive jolt of shock straight through their system. They are so accustomed to manipulating or intimidating people into giving them whatever they want that they simply do not know how to handle being told that they have to wait, or worse, that they are not getting what they want at all. Watch how they react when you delay them or deny them. You will see a distinct flicker of absolute disbelief, followed by a rapid escalation of anger. They might act like a spoiled child who has just had their favorite toy snatched away from them, becoming visibly agitated, deeply annoyed, or even outright aggressive. They simply do not have the internal emotional bandwidth to practice basic patience or self-regulation because they never developed those skills. Everything to them is urgent, everything is critical, and everything is always about them. By denying them that immediate payoff, you are forcing them to confront the one reality they spend their entire lives trying desperately to escape. The harsh reality that they are just as human, just as subject to rules, and just as unimportant as anyone else sitting in the room. This is precisely why they struggle so much to maintain long-term goals in their lives. They are constantly chasing the high of the next big thing, the next empty compliment, the next purchase, the next win, because they are deeply terrified of sitting alone in the silence of their own company. When you refuse to be the fuel for their endless impulsivity, you become a massive roadblock in their path to ego enhancement. They will treat your calm refusal as an active act of defiance, rather than just a practical decision. They will try to guilt trip you, wear you down with endless complaints, or make you feel like you are the villain for simply not moving at their lightning-fast pace. Recognizing this toxic pattern is vital because it clearly shows you that their manufactured urgency is almost always a calculated tactic. Once you realize they are throwing a tantrum simply because their unearned entitlement has been checked, you can finally stop feeling guilty for holding your ground and start seeing the interaction for exactly what it is. It is just a test of your boundaries that they are desperately trying to make you fail. Nothing triggers a narcissist faster than being held up to a mirror, because they spend every waking moment trying to convince both the world and themselves that the reflection they see is completely flawless. When you finally decide to call out their toxic behavior, especially in front of an audience, you are committing what they consider the ultimate betrayal. You are effectively ripping away the costume they have carefully tailored over many years to hide their true, deeply flawed self. The moment you strip that protective mask off in a public setting, you are not just pointing out a bad habit. You are triggering an intense, burning shame. Shame is the one single emotion a narcissist fundamentally cannot process or regulate. And because they lack any capacity to handle it internally, they will eject it outward onto you with explosive and overwhelming force. Do not waste your precious energy waiting around for a heartfelt apology or a quiet moment of genuine reflection from them, because that is simply not how their broken mind works. If you call them out openly, you should expect a tactical, rage-filled counterattack. They will immediately pivot to massive deflection, pulling out every single whataboutism in the book to shift the spotlight entirely away from their bad behavior and onto yours. Their primary goal is to turn the tables so fast and so hard that the onlookers completely forget what the original issue even was in the first place. They will launch a preemptive campaign to paint you as the villain, labeling you as crazy, overly dramatic, or completely unreasonable to anyone who will listen to them. They would literally rather burn down their own reputation while dragging yours straight through the mud than admit for even a second that you were right. Because for a narcissist, the deep humiliation of being publicly exposed is far more terrifying than any conflict they could possibly create. There is a direct and unbreakable rule in the dark world of narcissism. The louder and more grandiose the ego, the deeper and more hollow the desperate insecurity hiding underneath it. You might frequently see someone who struts around like they are completely untouchable, constantly bragging about their high status, their physical looks, their wealth, or their superior intellect. But that entire performance is nothing more than a frantic defense mechanism. They are fundamentally terrified of being seen as average. To a narcissist, being viewed as a regular person with standard human limitations is completely equivalent to non-existence. They have built their entire fragile identity on the persistent lie that they are superior to everyone else. So, they are constantly scanning their environment for any minor sign that someone else might finally see the cracks hiding in that elaborate facade. When you point out a flaw, even in the most subtle or gentle way possible, you are poking a deep wound that never actually heals. Whether you make a casual comment about a mistake they made, a detail they got completely wrong, or a superficial quality they are deeply insecure about, you will watch them spiral out of control instantly. This is not just a mildly bruised ego. It is a full-blown, shame-based rage. They react to normal, constructive feedback as if it were a severe physical attack, because to their fractured psyche, even a small, neutral observation confirms their absolute worst fear, that they are not the genius, the beauty, or the winner they constantly pretend to be. They will become completely irrational, defensive, and volatile, desperately trying to reestablish their imagined superiority by aggressively devaluing you. The moment you ping that deep-seated insecurity, you instantly move from being a convenient source of supply to becoming a direct threat to their very survival. And they will lash out with whatever venom they have left, just to silence the raw truth that you have dared to speak aloud. If you want to understand how to truly neutralize a narcissist, you have to realize that they are never looking for a real resolution to an argument. They are simply looking for a reliable fuel source. To a narcissist, conflict is a high-octane form of negative supply. When they pick a fight, nitpick your everyday words, or twist your reality until you are forced to defend yourself, they are essentially plugging straight into your emotional energy. They thrive on the chaos they create because it makes them feel powerful, visible, and completely in control. Every single time you try to explain your side of the story, justify your actions, or logically break down why they are being unfair, you are unknowingly giving them exactly what they want, which is your full, undivided attention. You are essentially pouring gasoline right onto their fire, and they love the burning heat. When you stop arguing altogether and refuse to play their toxic game, you are effectively cutting off their vital oxygen supply. This is precisely why silence is their absolute greatest enemy. They are desperately hungry for a reaction. They need you to get angry, to get hurt, to get defensive, or to get totally confused, because that reaction confirms that they still hold power over your emotions. When you choose to stay calm, stop explaining yourself, and simply disengage from the madness, you leave them standing there, shouting directly into an empty void. The narcissist simply does not know what to do with a target that completely refuses to be triggered. Without your active emotional participation, all of their dramatic theatrics fall flat, and they are left completely alone with their own inner emptiness, which is the one thing they are most terrified of facing in this life. This approach is never about being passive or weak. It is about reclaiming your personal power by refusing to contribute to their manufactured chaos. When you stop defending yourself against their baseless claims, you finally stop the endless cycle of victimization. You are no longer trying to convince them of your reality, which is a battle you could never win anyway, because they have zero genuine interest in the truth. Instead, you are firmly asserting that your peace of mind is worth far more than their desperate need for a fight. They might try to escalate the situation even further, becoming louder, more provocative, or more insulting, all in a frantic attempt to force a reaction out of you. This is the exact moment when you have to stay the course. By maintaining your steady silence or giving short, neutral responses, you are signaling that you are no longer a willing participant in their daily drama. You are essentially starving them of the attention they crave like oxygen. And for a narcissist, there is no greater punishment than being treated as if their provocations are completely irrelevant. Suggesting that a narcissist might benefit from professional help is perhaps one of the most dangerous things you can ever do in their presence. To you, it might sound like a compassionate, logical solution to an impossible relationship. But to a narcissist, it is an outright declaration of war. They do not view therapy as a tool for personal growth or healing, because that would require them to admit that something is fundamentally broken within them. Instead, they perceive the suggestion as a direct, crushing insult to their entire identity. In their warped reality, they are the smartest, most evolved, and most capable person in the entire room. By suggesting they need a psychologist or a counselor, you are effectively telling them that they are deeply flawed. And for someone whose entire life is built on a fragile foundation of imagined superiority, that is an unforgivable offense. It is vital to understand that they are not just lying to you. They are fighting for their very lives to protect their ego from a truth they find far too painful to acknowledge. They will double down on their stories, accusing you of trying to get rid of them or make them look crazy to all your friends and family members. They may even go as far as to manipulate the narrative to make themselves look like the long-suffering saint who has been patiently putting up with your mental instability all along. They are true masters of this deflection because they are terrified of the silence that would come from sitting in a therapist's office where there is nowhere left to hide and no one left to manipulate. By refusing the help and attacking your sanity instead, they successfully dodge the accountability they are so desperate to avoid. Recognizing that their hostile reaction is just a desperate, frantic scramble to protect their false image will help you stay grounded. Knowing that their accusations are just smoke and mirrors, meant to distract you from the fact that they are the ones who are completely unable to face themselves. Setting firm boundaries is the single most effective way to expose the true controlling nature of a narcissist. To understand why this triggers them so violently, you have to realize that they do not see you as an equal human being with your own needs, rights, and personal autonomy. They see people merely as objects, assets to be used, manipulated, and discarded whenever they stop serving a useful purpose. Because they view you as a primary source of narcissistic supply, they believe they have an inherent right to your time, your emotional energy, and your personal space. In their world, you are just a tool that is supposed to function exactly how they want it to, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you set a firm boundary, you are essentially telling that tool to stop working, and their minds simply cannot compute that level of sheer defiance. The moment you stand your ground, whether it is by saying no to their constant demands, stopping them from invading your privacy, or refusing to tolerate their verbal abuse, they will not respect it. In fact, they will often view your healthy boundary as a personal challenge that must be brutally crushed. You will see them treat your rules as if they are merely silly suggestions that do not apply to them. They will push, prod, and test your limits constantly to see if they can break your resolve. They do not respect your need for safety or respect because they do not believe you are even entitled to have any. Their internal logic dictates that they should have total freedom to violate your personal space, while you should have absolutely zero right to protect it. This is by far the most critical stage of the entire interaction. If you give in to them even once, you have taught them that your boundaries are fake and can easily be negotiated away with enough drama. But if you hold firm, you expose their deepest weakness, which is their complete inability to handle a relationship where they are not the master. Their extreme reaction to your boundary is actually a quiet confession of how much they need to control you just to feel okay about themselves. By maintaining your stance, you are not just protecting your own peace. You are finally forcing the narcissist to realize that you are no longer a disposable object in their personal collection, but a sovereign person with power over your own life. It is the exact moment they lose their grip. And for you, it is the true beginning of reclaiming your freedom. The narcissist's entire existence is governed by one singular, rigid rule, which is that they must always be the one in charge. They do not view relationships as partnerships built on mutual respect or shared goals. They view them strictly as a hierarchy, where they must hold the title of absolute authority. Whether they play the role of the primary breadwinner, the helpless victim who needs constant saving, or the brilliant intellectual who knows better than everyone else, they have to be the one steering the ship. When they sense that you are no longer playing their game, when you stop seeking their daily approval, or when you begin to make major decisions for yourself without consulting them first, they do not just feel annoyed. They feel a primal, blind panic. They realize that their tight grip on the steering wheel is finally slipping away. And for a narcissist, the loss of control is the ultimate nightmare. The moment they see that you are waking up to their manipulation, they will instantly shift into damage control mode. You will watch them cycle through a desperate toolkit of tactics designed solely to regain their dominance. They will double down on their bad behavior, becoming even more overbearing or intrusive to see if they can force you back into submission. If that does not work, they will quickly turn to calculated dishonesty. They will lie about their true intentions, create imaginary crises just to get your attention, or offer up grand, insincere promises of personal change. They will tell you exactly what you want to hear, promising that they are going to therapy, that they are truly sorry, and that they have finally realized the error of their ways. But these are always just empty words meant to buy them time until they can reestablish their comfortable position at the top of the hierarchy. If they realize that their desperate attempts at manipulation are falling completely flat, and that you have truly stepped outside of their sphere of influence, their behavior will take a much darker turn. They simply cannot exist in a world where they are not the primary force.